We're dinks, and here's how we spend most of our Saturdays in our early 30s. We slept until 7, but laid in bed till 8. I got out of bed and did some laundry, then made the bed. I changed into workout clothes and drank my AG1. Then I supervised David while he did the dishes. I made a smoothie, and then we relaxed and caught up on work on the back porch. After that, I got on the treadmill for about an hour. We had dinner reservations with friends, so I got to take my time getting ready, and then we headed out. We met our friends for dinner and drinks, and we were still in bed by 10 o'clock. It was a great day.
Of course, she has to watch Clint do the dishes because he never does them right. Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. My name's Luke Radowski, here of the best political show, as we are going to be going live for the next 2 hours discussing all the latest and craziest news unfolding right now. As, of course, the woke left university protests are expanding, as the former president of the United States just got involved with them. There's a lot of very interesting updates surrounding P. Diddy. Justin Bieber is crying. The Biden administration is buying off adult stars. And our guest has a major lawsuit going on right now in Canada that we're going to be talking about here. All for the next 2 hours, which, of course, we will always ask you guys to share this broadcast with your friends and family members, as, of course, YouTube is giving us the business. They're going after 12-year-old videos of ours and saying that we violated health policies that were implemented 3 years ago. And, of course, they're showing us to less and less people, but that's okay because they've been doing that for a very long time. And when you guys actually share this broadcast, it really does make a big difference, as, of course, you could also participate in the broadcast. And one way for you guys to do that is to sign up to lukeunfiltered.com. And then by doing so, you get the ability to actually call into the show and join the conversation. You get to ask us whatever you want. You get to show us whatever you want. There's no filters. And you actually have unlimited free speech to say and do whatever you want. Take advantage of it. Sign up to lukeunfiltered.com right now, as, of course, we do a lot of cool stuff like nature hikes. We just did one in Austin, Texas. Last week, we did one in Miami. I'm setting up the new dates. These nature hikes only available for members of lukeunfiltered.com, one of many perks that allow you to, of course, participate in this independent media organization. We, of course, also will be reading your Rumble rants, super chats, but we prefer you guys check out streamlabs.com/info WRC/tip. The link is in the description. You could click on it, and your super chats actually get to show up on screen. If you super chat enough, there's actually actions that are going to be prompted on screen. Lots of really fun stuff on Streamlabs that only takes a 3% service charge rather than a 30% YouTube charge from YouTube. Joining us for today's conversation is, I think, one of, and I don't say this lightly, I think one of the most prominent, bravest individuals, especially within the last 3 years, and that is author Pawlowski, pastor, author. For the people who might know you, who are you and how would you introduce yourself?
Well, I'm a father and I'm a lover, believe it or not.
That's how you became a father.
I love peace. I'm a peacemaker. I love to keep my peace. And of course, you know, and I know that the enemy doesn't like that. The left doesn't like to leave us in peace, and they constantly attack. So I've decided to stand up. And my story started behind the Iron Curtain in Poland under the boots of the Soviets many, many years ago. I not only grew up in hell, as I call it, but I also saw the power of the people. And that's what I preach. That's what I teach. I teach history, theology, and I tell the people I have seen the power of the millions when they took it to the streets and took down the biggest empire in the 80s, the Soviet Empire, and Poland was once again free.
It's almost as if history is repeating and we still have to fight for our freedom still today, but now from the inverse side. As of course, we have a very amazing interview that we did with you a couple of months ago. If my producer's watching, can you guys please share it in the chat room on YouTube? Because the video's on YouTube, and the conversation we had about Poland, our history, your history, and sadly what's now happening with modern history is very important context here. As your video calling out the demons away from your church 3 years ago. Extremely powerful, inspired a lot of people. We'll get into that. Your lawsuit, which I think is going to be major too, in just a little bit. But before we do, Clint has to introduce himself as, of course, he's also a pretty big lover.
Oh, yeah.
He's very busy.
I've got a new girlfriend at the beginning of every single show. I haven't even met them. It's amazing. I'm totally honored to share the stage today with this legend. I was telling him before the show, the viral videos, for those that don't know or aren't connecting the dots yet, this is the guy who was throwing the cops out of his church, and it was just in the very hard lockdowns. It was absolutely impactful on me. It inspired me. I was feeling very hopeless at the time. When I heard on I think it was last Wednesday that we were going to have you on today, I was super excited. So Clint Russell, running for VP under the LP, host of Liberty Lockdown, got a new episode dropping later tonight, and also co-host of Tower Gang. That's about it. But if you guys could please pick up your phones and subscribe to both the Best Political Show and Liberty Lockdown so that you never miss an episode. We are on RSS as well. And we got Steph on the buttons.
Steph's in the house. And Steph, before, after you introduce yourself, let's just zoom out of that camera a little bit and then press focus. Steph is glitching. She's in the Matrix. I don't know what she did, but she did something. And
it's all my fault.
It's, yeah.
I'm glitching.
It always is.
Oh, yeah. The women. I'm glitching over here. Steph, we are change pushing the buttons with a glitchy camera.
Awesome. Well, it does look like you're a South Park character. It's pretty funny, but it works out. It definitely provides us some interesting artistic. Divine intervention that we didn't know was happening today, but it is. We'll work with it, as of course we have our first YouTube super chat from Andrew Jacobs, who says less than 6K till Clint equals the red taint libertarian, referring to, of course, what happens when we get 100,000 subscribers on YouTube and Clint gets the magic juice button pressed on. We'll tell you about it in just a little bit. As of course, let's just get into the main focus of today's discussion, and that is the protests that are unfolding right now all throughout the United States, but more specifically, there's one in Austin where a lot of people are now being arrested, as the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, took to social media and said no encampments will be allowed. Instead, arrests are being made, highlighting state troopers that are being called into the Austin University as they're meeting protesters, dragging them out, arresting them, as it looks like a lot of them are conducting sit-ins, camp-ins, and are saying specifically, no, we're not going to move. You're going to have to drag us out of there. That's happening right now as arrests are being made, as this one individual is now being carried out of the university. Here's the small 22-second clip to give you context to show you what's going on.
They're choking me with my scarf.
She's choking. What's your first name?
Gabriella.
Gabriella. Shout your name.
They have it.
What's your last name?
Found it. They have it. Please stop taking your scarf.
Of course, the National Lawyers Guild is also there, and you can see this woman just being absolutely dragged out of there, as these kind of protests have definitely sparked very interesting conversations. It does look like Austin is the main place where majority of the arrests are being made right now, but also Columbia University, where now the faculty there just linked arms in order to stop the, quote, attack on students, as students there are also occupying the local school there, as Columbia University just announced that they have officially started suspending students who are sitting in and deciding not to leave their encampment, not, quote, dispersing. As you could see, the tent city that they built inside of their university there, as the conversations here are pretty divided, just like the situation in the Middle East. I don't know what you guys think of what's going on here. I have my own kind of initial reaction to this, but a lot of this kind of reminds me of Occupy Wall Street. A lot of this reminds me of a lot of people now using media to galvanize more attention for themselves. And I think they're doing it in such an effective way that, as I've been saying, these protests are only going to grow and expand from here. That's my perspective. What do you guys think?
Oh, I think you're right. I mean, it really depends on how harshly they crack down. Because if you saw what happened to the Trump supporters, you don't see many large gatherings of Trump supporters ever since that fateful January day. So I do think that there is a chilling effect if you come down hard enough. I don't think that's good. I'm certainly not advocating for it. In fact, I'm advocating the exact opposite. I think that if we aren't allowed to peacefully protest and voice our concerns about what's transpiring, particularly in our names, particularly with our tax dollars, well, then it ultimately leads towards violence, and I think that's what we all want to see less of. So that's my hope, but it's apparently not happening because these red state governors are cracking down pretty hard.
Well, I have been observing this for many, many years, and my biggest beef with our Western government, either in the United States or Canada, is a double application or a different application of the law. One law for me, a totally different law for D. And I have observed this with BLM. I have observed this with Occupy the Streets protest, which I have seen them, and they were in our city, Calgary, for months, and no tickets, no enforcement. But of course, as you know, I got over 350 citations for feeding the homeless people. So it's one law for them and totally different for me. I am advocating always for the equal application of the law. So laws should be applied equally for everyone. If you're not allowing certain things, you should not be able to allow certain things for everyone. The problem I have with this protest, and of course I am in favor of protests. I have done them hundreds of times. My Get Out
done
video,
jail time over it,
right? So I am all for it. However, what we're dealing here is not just a protest, is advocating for genocide. We have on the streets of Calgary people yelling and screaming from the river to the sea, and I won't finish. I'm sure you've heard it many times. And I have a problem with that because there's a certain group of people that really, really want to see another nation destroyed, just like during the 30s and 40s. We have seen it in Europe. And I'm against that. You are free, you should be, to voice your opinion as long as it's not advocating for violence. I am a peaceful protester. Everything I have done in my life was always peaceful. You should be able to voice your opinion in a peaceful way. At the moment you are moving into violence or advocating for violence on certain people, it should be stopped. We had an incident just a few days ago on our church. During our church service, we have a sign when we feed the homeless people where on the sign it says that there will be no peace in the Middle East without the Prince of Peace, Jesus Christ. And I mean, it's a very peaceful, nice message because we are Bible-believing people. I'm a pastor, and I pray for the peace in the Middle East. I pray for the peace in Jerusalem. I pray for the peace, in the Jewish nation. The Bible says, whoever curses you will be cursed. Whoever blesses you will be blessed. And the message is, listen, you're brothers. I mean, we have to go back to history. They are brothers fighting each other. I mean, it's absolute insanity. So the only thing that I know how to reconcile the brothers together is if they will both receive Jesus Christ, because he is the Prince of Peace. Of course, the other side hated that idea. They hated our sign, and they attacked it violently, ripping it from our area. And they were yelling and screaming, and of course, they are not so loving. They are not so peaceful, because it only works one way. If I did something like this, I would be arrested and charged with hate crime.
Yeah.
But because they are doing it in at least Canada, they have a total free pass. They can do whatever they want. I want you to know that the Canadian police officers, I don't know if you saw the news, are bringing coffee and donuts to those people that are blocking the streets and advocating for hatred. I don't know if you saw that. Canadian police are actually delivering coffee to the main players on the streets and cameras. It's crazy.
Sorry, we got a triggered a rumble rant with a Canadian school teacher bazunka blow up from Clint Super Contagious H, who said hello y'all and triggered our Streamlabs donation. Thank you, Clint Super Contagious H user for triggering that and giving us $101 my super chat. I really appreciate that very much. As of course, sorry to interrupt that conversation, Arthur.
The timing on that was wild.
Yeah, the timing of that was pretty crazy. As of course, there is a double standard. There is a double kind of implementation of the law, specifically in Austin, where a lot of these students were arrested. The Travis County Attorney Office, by the way, dropped the charges against the 57 students who were previously arrested. As of course, if it's fair to say that they were right-wing protesters, those charges probably would have not been dropped. Now, as arrests are being made, I think it's fair to say that a lot of these charges against these students for trespassing on their own campus will be dropped. But overwhelmingly, from my kind of assessment, I have seen some of these protesters. You could always go to the protest and you could always talk to the craziest person. You could have them say the craziest thing. We did see, I think, one or two incidences of them saying some awful stuff. But overall, when you look at this protest, I think they've been mainly peaceful. You compare this protest to the protest that happened during the last election cycle. These guys look absolutely incredible compared to the summer of love that America had to go through during the BLM riots. And I think they're entitled to their speech. I think their speech, a lot of them represents a lot of frustration with the economic opportunities in this country. I think it represents their frustration to America's policy in the Middle East. And I think overall, these protesters have been a lot peaceful than previous ones, and to me, trying to stop them is only going to make them grow. And I think it's also not kind of smart for the Republicans, since a lot of these protesters really don't like the Biden administration, and they're driving a wedge towards a key issue that's having a lot of young people not support Joe Biden. And this is the kind of conversation that is being started here that I think is important to have in full context.
And Trump truthed out today saying,
I have that story lined up.
Okay.
Yes.
Well,
We're going to pull it up in just a
I
second.
mean, it's just bizarre.
But when do you draw a line? I mean,
Do
taking
you
over.
you really think that phrase, it's by every single person that utters it, says so in violence? You think that they're calling for violence? Because I don't believe so.
No, 100%. They are calling for violence. They said that to us multiple times. Maybe they're not. Maybe put it this way. Maybe they're a little bit more afraid to say that to the American people. You've got your Second Amendment. You've got a lot more rights than we have. But in Canada, they express themselves that that's exactly what they want. They want the complete destruction of the Jewish nation. They believe that every Jewish person should be shot and eliminated. So their chant has a meaning. I was approached by a number of people. I debated imams in a university in Calgary. I was told that in 20, 30 years, they will take over America. They will take over Canada, and they will drive us out. They will subdue us. You got to remember, Islam, that's what Islam means. It's to subdue. It's to conquer. It's to dominate. You got to understand what you're dealing with. It's a totalitarian regime. Under that regime, there is no open door for any democracy, any freedom. There's no freedom under a dictatorship or totalitarian regime. So historically speaking, when you look at Europe, what is happening or other countries, with the moment they reach about 15%, that's where they rise up and they start showing who is the boss. When they reach about 20, 30%, it's over for that country. It's a distraction. You see that in France. You see that in England. England is gone. France is gone. I mean, it's over.
Yeah.
They just don't know it yet.
Yeah. Well, I'm just curious, though. I mean, I agree with much of what you said there, but you have Christian churches that have flourished inside of Palestine. So how do you square that with this thesis that it's totalitarian and that they basically won't allow people to coexist? I mean, you have IDF that's shelling Christian monasteries over the past few months. That has to concern you, doesn't it?
And then there's also Christian charity organizations. There was even a Polish man that lost his life when he was trying to feed people in Palestine after what people believe to be a kind of deliberate attack.
Yeah, that was as well. World Central Kitchen.
We're talking about the war. But let me ask you this question. I don't know if you have a wife or children, but I do. And if you would come to my home, if you would try to hurt my children, gloves off, and I would do everything in my power to subdue you, to remove you, or to eliminate you, if that was the only option.
But
so we have to understand.
The issue, though, is that the Palestinians feel as if they have been threatened and dragged from their homes and removed from their land, too. I mean, if you look...
But that's not history. History is showing us that for decades, the Israeli government was giving them citizenship. It was allowing them or inviting them to be part of Israel. and they refused. You got to know the history, how this whole conflict started. You got to go back to the Roman Empire. It was the Romans that called that land Palestine, Philistia, to mock them. You got to remember that when everything happened in 1948, they just wanted to move into a place that would not shoot them in the back of the head or put them in concentration camps. I am a Polish immigrant. I grew up hearing stories from my grandma about what happened in Auschwitz-Birkenau, what happened in Majdanek, what happened in, during that period of time. When you are being subjected to something like this, the one desire you have, and actually with that desire, I emigrated to Canada, believe it or not. I just wanted to live in peace. That's it. Just leave me people alone.
And you ended up back in the gulags anyways.
I know, but we started this, and you asked me how I would describe myself. And what did I say? I'm a man of peace. And that's true. I would just want to be left alone. Listen, when I was growing up in hell, I was dreaming about America. I was dreaming about Canada, the land that you can work hard and achieve something beautiful and leave it a legacy, an inheritance for your children. So when I emigrated, we escaped on a boat from Poland to Greece. And when the Canadian government, because America was closed for us at that time, the Canadian government invited us to the Canadian embassy, and the officer looked at us and said, listen, we had businesses, and they said, sell everything that you have and come to Canada. Canada is the freest country on earth. In Canada, no one will ever persecute you for your faith. And that's 350 citations later, 120 court cases, and 16 arrests. And many times I was detained. The craziness continues. I came to America for peace. And now violence is chasing me down. And my message is very simple. Listen, if you are emigrating to America and you want to create Chinatown, obviously you should go back where you came from, because why would you bring hell to a new land of opportunity? And the same thing, the same message I would have to the Arabic people. If you want Sharia law, if you want Hamas, if you want terrorism, you know what? Go to Saudi Arabia.
Right.
They will welcome you over there. Go to other countries that have this hell on earth and enjoy it if that's what you want. But in America should be a country where all that stuff is behind us, where we, truly can start over. It doesn't matter what is color of your skin. It doesn't matter where you came from, Polish, Russian, Czech. I got Russian friends. I got German friends, even though we have, very, crazy history together, or intimate history. My grandma was in Auschwitz-Birkenau, like I said. I grew up in a city with concentration camps. The stories of what happened, we grew up hearing it. And I grew up behind the Iron Curtain under the boots of the Soviets. So, of course, that totalitarian regime, the never-ending lineups, freedom of speech did not exist, and all those different things, the show trials. So we come here for a purpose. What is your purpose? To live and work in peace, to start something, to build something, to pass it to your children. And if there are people that cannot, for whatever reason, integrate with what America is supposed to be, the great American dream, then I would suggest to you that, go back where you came from. If it comes to Israel, it's a very complicated story, because it has thousands of years with history attached to it, and you've got brothers that are fighting with each other. You got brothers that are hating each other, and that's why.
In some ways, it's a civil war. It's
right,
terrible.
and that's why my message is very simple. When you receive Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, He is the Prince of Peace. You will be able to live in peace, and ultimately, that's what we want. That's what we want. But there are certain people, and you know that just refuse to live in peace for this reason or for that reason. And if I was attacked, I think I would decide to do everything in my power to stop a future attack from happening.
But
it's very difficult.
All the way to the extent of basically eliminating them from that land, because that's a lot of these protesters' concerns, is that it looks like they're going to ethnically cleanse them entirely from Gaza.
Have you been in that? You see, I went there on a semi-political trip. I was able to spend some time in West Bank. I traveled all over Israel. And I want to tell you something. When I was there, the rockets were coming. When I was there, and I had my children there.
Yeah. I'm sure that left an impact on you.
So let me ask you this question. Is this right or wrong?
No, it's obviously wrong.
So how you stop it? How
Well-
you stop a neighbor that constantly is throwing deadly weapons at you and your children? How you stop it? I mean, it has to be some kind of a way of stopping the violence, stopping the person that wants to hurt you and your children. And I was observing this for decades.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, if this was happening to me, I think I would act in a very crazy way. If I had a neighbor that was throwing rocks at my children every single day, I think I would retaliate.
Yeah.
I think I would do something to stop that person.
Undoubtedly, but inverse that. I mean, if you had been raised in Gaza with basically walled off, and you have all of your economy is limited to what the Israelis decide you're allowed to bring in and whatnot, would that not also radicalize you? Can you see the human side of the opposition here?
But we have in our two nations, we have something that we call native reserves. Why do we have them? I work inside native reserves. It's a very similar situation.
You mean like reservations in America?
Right,
Okay,
Indian
yeah,
reservations, right? They don't want to assimilate. They don't want to be part of the American society. They
Sure.
want to have their own little thing. So what do? You see, Israel offered Hamas and offered the Palestinians multiple times citizenship. They offered them, hey, you want to be part, you want to become Israelites, you will welcome you, come and be part of our nation. And they said no. Every single time they said no. Every single time. And the rockets keep coming from that area. So what do? I'm just simply asking. You see, I'm not the Israelite. I'm not a Palestinian. I'm just a Polish immigrant that grew up in hell. And I'm telling you, I just want to live in peace. So I'm trying to understand the conflict. And if I was being constantly attacked, if the things were being thrown at my children, suddenly one day I would wake up and say, that's it, not one ever again will come way. I'm just trying to reason with the circumstances that we're having right now.
I'm just saying I understand both sides and feeling aggrieved righteously and then behaving in a really over-the-top violent way.
So let's come to the native reserves. Let's go to the chiefs and let's say, listen, what happened hundreds of years ago, we cannot change. Agreed? You cannot change history. What the Russians did to us, I cannot hold the new generation accountable for what their grandfathers did. That's ridiculous.
Of course.
I can't hold accountable, the Germans right now
Agreed.
for what their grandparents did. What happened. We can't change the past. We cannot change history. So the white people came here and the natives did this and the white people did that. That's history now. We cannot change that. Can we move on and work together as Americans, as Canadians? In my opinion, we could. I want to. I want every citizen to be equal under the law, but they don't want that. Mm-hmm. In my country, in Canada, they have perks. They got $1,000. Some of other tribes got more money every single month. They got free land, free education. They can hunt anytime they want. They fish for free. So those are the perks that they want to keep, yet yelling and screaming, we are the bad guys. You see, I had to pay for education. My kids are being educated, and it costs me a fortune. Their kids are being educated for free. I'm paying for it, the taxpayers. So you see, we are looking at a situation that is very convenient for some people for some times, for certain times. When there are perks and incentives, we want to be a separate country. When finally the country says, okay, then you have it. You cannot have it both ways. So have your Gaza, do whatever you want, elect your own government. You know that those people elected Hamas. Are you aware of that?
Yeah, 2006, yeah.
It was them that chose terrorists to rule over them.
It was also funded by Netanyahu and the Likud.
But that's politics. But they've chosen to choose those people to rule over them.
Barely. By 40%. It wasn't, and the vast majority of people alive today were not of age to vote for it. So the people that are you were talking about collective guilt earlier, or reparations, like can you hold prior generations responsible? It's about 20% of the current population that actually voted for Hamas. The last election was 2006. So I just think that it's
but that's exactly
unfair
what
to hold it.
No.
Accountable
But think
for
about
that.
it. That's exactly what we have in America. How many people, how many millions voted for? Let's say, I know the election was stolen or whatever. I don't want to even go there. We all know the truth. But let's say, percentage-wise, how many people did vote for this current government, right? You've got what, 20%?
80 million allegedly,
right?
Well, some people say stolen, some people say fortified.
Yes, to clarify.
And I think what they did with ballot harvesting did allow them to have the edge here, and they did change the laws last minute.
In Calgary, 170,000 people out of 1.3 million Calgarians voted for the mayor. So how many, what is this percentage? It's what, 12%, 15% of the population, and we have a devil. Like literally, we have a devil as a mayor.
Yeah.
Because it was a small.
And I think it's fair to describe Hamas that way. But that's my argument, is that, like, can everyone be held responsible for the action of a minority that's voting for a party that they may not even know what they intend to ultimately do?
And that's
Just really quick, we got some super chats here. Steph, can you read this one by the redheaded libertarian, and then we'll focus on with what's happening also at these universities, because we could have a full-on debate.
Yeah, let's
I think
not
we
do
should
that.
have the full-on debate in just a little bit. Steph, read the redheaded libertarian's super chat here. I put it in the chat room.
Government can't pretend or curate protests. They can regulate it. Protesters can't incite violence. Burdenberg test. Or block movement, false imprisonment.
Yeah, I
It's the
agree.
Brandenburg test.
Thank you.
I agree with the redheaded libertarian. I think if anyone is calling for violence or doing violence, that they should, of course, deal with the law. I think if people are protesting peacefully, I think they should have a right to peacefully protest. But we should be very careful not to conflate the two, because the state loves power and they love situations where they get to get involved in. And I think a lot of right-wingers should be a little bit more careful when saying the state needs to kind of come in, because there are a lot of very interesting discussions here. A lot of people are saying that these people are building their own borders, that they're having border security. We see people saying that people need to be welcomed into one of these territories. They're calling this the people's kind of republic, the people's liberated zone. But there's also a lot of individuals that are prevented from walking into these zones, as there's a video happening right now of one student who says that he's Jewish, and he is saying that he is being prevented from going to class because these protesters are preventing him from doing so. Here's the clip.
You guys have closed the entrance. We are UCLA students. I have my ID right here. I'm being blocked off, not by the security guard, but by you two. You three. Oh, look, they're making their burger while I'm going this way. Excuse me. This is what they do. Everybody, look at this. Look at this. I'm a UCLA student. I deserve to go here. We pay tuition. This is our school. And they're not letting me walk in. My class is over there. I want to use that entrance. Why can't they go? Will you let me go in? This could be over in a second. Just let me and my friends go in to class.
We're not engaging in that.
Then you can move. Will you move?
We're not engaging in that.
Okay, we're going. We're going. I'm going in. I have my hands up. I'm not hurting them.
Yeah, so, correct. I don't know if he's Jewish or not, but he is being prevented from being able to go to class.
That's going too far, in
yeah.
my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Because now your right to protest is literally destroying another life. There should be a line of things that you're allowed to do and the things you're not allowed to do if your protest is literally destroying other lives, preventing others from living their lives.
Yeah, no disagreement on that. I think if you're preventing students from going to their class, if you're blocking freeways, all of that I think is improper forms of protest. So no disagreement.
But again, I've covered protests all throughout the world. I've even spent some time in the West Bank. I also spent a lot of time in Israel as well, and I saw a lot of very kind of interesting stuff, because you see a lot of people getting gaslit. You see a lot of people being told that these different stories, like they're after you, they're attacking you. You see it from both sides here and both different perspectives here. But for me, this is the worst of the worst. It's them stopping people from moving. There was a situation with Alex Stein. He was there. I was supposed to be there with him, but there was some kind of miscommunication. He got tackled by one of the protesters. Yeah. But compare that to what happened during BLM. It's still absolutely nothing. And if this is kind of the main thing that you're showing us, sure, it's not good. You shouldn't prevent people from walking anywhere they want to go, especially when it's their university. But those people should be dealt with. Those people should deal with the ramifications. But for me, still, this is nothing compared to a lot of the very violent protests. Right. And to me, these people overwhelmingly, they're nonviolent. There's also Jewish people taking part of these in these protests, and I think that nuance is important here, and that perspective is important to, of course, talk about here in all fairness. As Donald Trump came out on Truth Social and just declared, quote, "Stop the protests now" on his Truth Social media campaign. As some people are saying yes, some people are saying no. Arthur, I think I know where you stand. Clint, I know where you stand.
Yep.
What would be your kind of strongest arguments for stopping it? What would be your strongest arguments for keeping it? I don't know who wants to go first.
Okay, I'll take it. I think that these protests are kind of necessary, just simply because the U.S. Is taxing us and providing both munitions and aid to Israel as well as Gaza. I am a genuine America First type of person, and I believe that we should stop all foreign aid. It should be voluntary if we want to donate to causes. I am totally in support of charitable. I mean, you do great charitable work. I am not at all interested in being robbed to fund proxy wars, be that in Gaza, be that in Ukraine, be that in potentially in Iran or wherever else. I reject it entirely. So I am in favor of any anti-war protests. I understand your concerns about some of the rhetoric that's used, but at the same time, I think that from the people that I know that have participated in these, they don't perceive it to be violence. They perceive it to be in defense of an oppressed people. I do not buy into the critical theory, worldview of oppressor versus oppressed in all topics. But I think in this one, there is legitimate grievances on both sides. I think that what Hamas did on October 7th is atrocious. I think that what's happened to the Palestinians from 2006 until now in 1968, 1948, I mean, you can go all the way back. I think that having your land taken from you is also reason to be very upset. So I come down on the side of this is extraordinarily complicated. American people, as long as we're being taxed and robbed to fund it, that we ought to be able to protest to say that we do not agree with it.
Do you have a counter argument, Arthur?
Well, I'm a Canadian citizen. We have something that is called the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is part of our Constitution, and it starts with a preamble that says, whereas Canada acknowledges the supremacy of God and the rule of law. And one of those provisions, those fundamentally guaranteed rights, is freedom of peaceful assembly. So I am 100% for protest, peaceful protest.
Sure.
If you're coming, so for example, I run a charity that feeds thousands of people on the streets of Calgary. We never stopped feeding them, even though I became the first Canadian to get a COVID ticket, a big light ticket. And I was feeding the homeless people when the authorities showed up. And right now, in front of the City Hall, we have the Christians, so our organization that is feeding the people. We still do that 3 times a week. On our right, we have the Jewish people protesting, and in front of us, it's hundreds, sometimes thousands of Palestinians. And I'm 100% for all of those groups to be there. And sometimes we'll have people from Ukraine behind us. So you got 4 different types of protests, if you will, and everyone, I believe, should remain peacefully.
Agreed.
You want to say your piece, you want to gather, but remain peacefully. So I'm 100% for that. And there is a way of doing a protest that is sometimes may be inconvenient in application to others. Some people will not be happy, for example, with marching in the middle of the streets. And I think that's also acceptable form of protest when, 5,000, 10,000 people will take it to the streets and, okay, I have to sit in the car for half an hour, 1 hour. That's okay in democracy. Sometimes we have to swallow those moments and say, for the sake of the bigger picture, those people should be allowed to voice their opinion in an inconvenient way. So I am 100% for that, because if you don't allow people, again, we're talking to a Polish immigrant that grew up in an environment when the millions of Polish people took to the streets in 1980, 81, 82, and I saw that with my own eyes. And the crackdown was brutal. Tens of thousands were arrested. People were shot dead. That's unacceptable, because you don't have democracy. You don't have a republic if people are not allowed to voice their opinion. Even the most crazy opinion that whatever, there is no moon, right? And I would argue that, I think you're crazy that there is no moon because I can see it. But hey, you have a right to protest or say
I agree
those
with that
different things.
completely, but there is also a counter to some things that you said. For example, you're saying people can peacefully protest in an inconvenient way. What if that inconvenient march stops an emergency vehicle from saving your father's life who's dying from a heart attack?
Well, that's then unacceptable. And I have been part of the protests where we took it to the streets, we blocked the streets, but then there were emergency vehicles coming and we opened the street for them, because you got to remember, we are here to help, not to hurt. We are here to heal, not to wound. And if you go crazy all the way to the left or all the way to the right, now suddenly people are dying.
That's kind of why I feel like there needs to be a little bit of an etiquette in terms of peaceful protests. And even with this video we saw where the kid was trying to get to his class, I think he should have been left passage. I think that makes, inconveniencing in order to be heard it's not necessary.
Well, this is actually a really important tie-in. It ties in everything that we're talking about, particularly with you being a protester in Canada. I had many of the Freedom Convoy commanders or block leaders or whatever you want to call them, the guys that were sitting in their trucks. I had them on Liberty Lockdown back during those protests, and one of the most heartwarming interviews I've ever done, because he was walking around the streets as they were shut down, and they were showing all these signs from Canadians that said, "We love you, keep going, thank you so much." Really, really powerful stuff. But what I took away from that, which was really profound to me, is that they had made it so that even as they were shutting down all these streets, they had still left a basically auto passage for any emergency vehicles. Yeah. They went out of their way to make sure that while they wanted to make a stand, they also wanted to make sure that they didn't destroy anybody's life.
Yeah, and you saw a lot of those videos. It was fascinating to see the kind of parting of the sea with ambulances kind of moving in and out, and people kind of protesting in a way where they were actually trying to kind of disrupting people's lives, but still getting their message across to a lot of people, which I think is absolutely effective. There's also a lot of different forms of activism, especially when it comes to memes, especially when it comes to information. But I think we all agree here, if they're violent, they should be dealt with. If they're not, they have a right to express their opinions, whether we like it or not. There's even some conversations from the White House, according to Fox News, that is potentially deliberating if some of these protesters should be barred from a student loan forgiveness program. As many people are saying, they participated in this protest. They're protesting against, quote, our greatest ally, and therefore they have to be barred from student loan forgiveness programs. And again, I think this should apply to no one, because I think that student loan forgiveness is an incredibly bad idea, and it incentivizes an incredibly bad institution in the United States that brainwashes these children to hate themselves, to hate this country, and they create this kind of woke mind virus where a lot of these people are protesting. They're disrupting the universities. My opinion's a little bit more radical. I'm just saying, if they want to disrupt Columbia, if they want to disrupt UT Austin with the staff and facility, they want to stop themselves, do it. I don't think the state, I don't think the government should be involved here. This is where I would disagree with Donald Trump. I'm just saying they have a problem. Let them deal with it. To me, this is a leftist problem. With leftists going after other leftists.
Yeah, man. They created the monster. Let them.
My opinion is
let them deal with it.
Let them fight. They want to fight. Let them fight.
Yeah, I think it's totally wrong.
But the problem, the moment government comes in and penalizes one group of people for political reasons, what is going to stop another government coming later on and do the same thing to the others? So now you've got divided nations and the hatred continues. That's why my sign that was attacked was so, I believe, right on target. There will be no peace unless we come to some kind of an agreement. And in my opinion, as a Christian, is if we would come and accept the Prince of Peace, God, Jesus Christ, there would be peace, because we will not be hating each other. So with the moment government, police, chief, sheriff comes in and says, I don't like what you're saying, and I'm going to penalize you for what you're saying. That's what the Canadian government did to the truckers and to us. They blocked our bank accounts. They penalized us for our speech. You got to remember, I was the first trucker, and this is the funniest part of the story. I did not come over there with the truck. I did not have any rig. I was there in the capacity of a pastor, but I was the first trucker and a farmer to be arrested within the Freedom Convoy. Yeah. And what was my crime? My crime was delivering a message, a sermon to a hurting Canadians on the private property. And the government did not like what I was saying. Therefore, they charged me with eco-terrorism. They charged me with inciting mischief. They charged me with the breach of a release order, because they said the words I said were politically incorrect. Therefore, we must penalize people that are disagreeing with the government rhetoric. So 5 years from now, let's say another government comes in and will be doing this to others, to those that were doing this to them. And this craziness will never stop.
Well, this is my whole point, is that, like, well, I agree with you that you want to have basically a blind justice system. You want it to be applied equally. But if you're having unjust things that are perpetrating against one side, do you want it to be equal and now applied to the other side? And my argument would be that no, you don't. Like, you do not want what's happened to the J6ers, seeing them put in hundreds of years behind bars. I don't want to see that happen to these college kids anymore.
Of course,
either.
but you're not talking about justice now. You're talking about injustice. What was done to the people during January 6th is injustice.
Yes,
It's lawlessness.
same with the truckers.
This is a totalitarian regime. We're dealing with dictators. That's exactly what I saw growing up behind the Iron Curtain. That's what the Soviets were doing.
Right.
So we have a repetition of history. Luke is absolutely right. What we are witnessing right now is the early stages of 1930s. That's what we're seeing. And you got to remember, I won't say his name, you probably will know his name, but he was democratically elected in 1933.
Sure.
He was placed a chancellor in Germany, democratically.
Yep.
And then
supported by the Bushes, supported by the Rockefellers, supported
Pope.
by the Rothschilds.
Pope.
Yep.
Pope was funding his campaigns. I mean, this is crazy. It was a truckloads of money that were going to that man and his party. And look, now we of course know what happened afterwards. So we got to recognize what is happening. They're trying to do the same thing. They're trying to divide us. And what was the power behind the movement under Solidarity movement? It was the people that came together and they said, enough of the division. Enough of the craziness. I don't like you. This is not about winning a popularity contest. This is about saving our children and the future of our children and our grandchildren. We must go back to our, sanity again and say what we are witnessing right now is propaganda. What we are witnessing right now is injustice, and we must bring justice back to this unjust system. So now the question is how we're going to do it. Polish people had no money, they had no power, a real power, and they were funded, but not nearly enough that was needed. And how did they do it? People, Americans and Canadians ask me this question all the time. Well, if the elections are rigged, if the media is bought and paid for, if the justice system is no longer just and educational system is not educating but indoctrinating children, how are we going to do it? Well, the Polish people did the right way. They took it to the streets and they did it peacefully. They just refused to cooperate with the villain, and they refused to work for the villain. The most powerful, you know what is the most powerful thing that we have? Is your time. The moment you decide not to give your time, your life, you see, there's nothing more precious than your life. Your time.
It's the one non-renewable resource.
Right? Your time is your life. If you refuse to support them, if you refuse to give them your time, that's why the labor strikes were so powerful, because the Polish people said, no, we're not going to work for you anymore. Yeah. And it collapsed the whole system. If Americans want their country back, because I have Americans coming to me and say, oh, this will never happen to you. And I'm looking at them like they're some kind of ostriches. It's not going to happen to us, and it's happening to you already.
Of course.
We have a Declaration of Independence. We have the Constitution of the United States of America. We have our amendments. It's like, tell that to the people living in New York.
Right.
Yes.
Because they don't have the Second Amendment. Tell that to the people living in Chicago.
Right.
They don't have your... Like, you got to remember, tyrants don't care about your piece of paper.
Totally agree.
You must care about your piece of paper. You must rise up for the sake of your children, for the sake of your rights and amendments, and you have to fight for them. You have to rise to the occasion. Polish people...
This is Pastor Lysander Spooner, and I like it a lot.
Yeah. The government's never going to liberate you. You got to liberate yourself.
No. And how you're going to do it? Well, I'm not advocating for any violence. And even during my sermon that landed me in prison, I said 3 times, peacefully.
Right.
Mahatma Gandhi style, Martin Luther King Jr. style, Solidarity style, which is very simple. Just refuse to cooperate with the villains. Don't work for them. When they tell you, go to work and do this for us, just say no.
Well, the issue...
power of the people. Imagine if millions, tens of millions of Americans will say to this administration, we're not going to support you anymore, and we're going to stay at home for a week. The whole system goes down.
Yeah, non-violent, non-compliance.
That's it.
We have a lot of we have a lot of rants and a lot of YouTube super chat stuff. Can you be prepared to read some of them? We were also rated by Revenge of the Sis. They gave us a rant for $5 saying ROTC raid. Have a good show, fellas. Thank you, Revenge of the Sis. We had this one from
shout out to Royce and Mersh. Thank you guys.
Yeah, really appreciate that, Steph. We have this one here from I'm Not Your Buddy Guy. Can you read it?
Yeah, it says, greetings from communist Canada. More specifically, the last somewhat free place in Canada, Alberta.
Awesome.
I was curious as to your thoughts on our premiere.
Oh, wow. Well, I know Danielle Smith personally for many years. We have been in the same party, Wild Rose Party. I know her personally, and I'm telling you, she's not what she says she is. In America, you call them rhinos. They're pretendees, they're hypocrites. Danielle Smith ran on the notion that she's going to provide amnesty bill. And of course, being charged with unbelievable criminal charges for being with the people, for organizing church services, for participating in illegal, in quote, gatherings. She promised me personally and others like me that the moment she's going to be elected, she's going to give us amnesty. We're going to walk free because we have not committed a crime. Everything we have done was protected under the Criminal Code of Canada, Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and the Constitution. And yet, of course, the totalitarian government didn't care. So we got locked up, arrested, and all bad things happened to us. She promised and she talked our language. So she got elected last May. And the moment she got elected, she has not done everything she promised she's going to do. We still have today in the province of Alberta, with that premier, we still have political prisoners in prison 2 years. It's unbelievable. They have done nothing. They were the boys I was there with, and they were charged with absolutely crazy criminal charges. To this day, this premier that knows, because we know her, of course, I just told you I had conversations with her, and meetings and all kinds of different things were happening within her, inner circle. She just passed a law allowing 6 months young babies to be jabbed. We have a governor, which is the premier, Danielle Smith, that is recommending this jab for every 3 months. I mean, it's insanity. A person that knows that people are dying and are being hurt by this experimental garbage, she is forwarding that. It was the government, the ministers that she reinstated. It was the same cabinet ministers like Tyler Shandro, a minister of, a so-called minister of justice, or a minister of health, Jason Copping, or the Nixon brothers. It was the very people that did party, and they were caught red-handed during the lockdowns, drinking whiskey. At the same time, we were being arrested in the middle of the street for keeping the churches.
And she kept all those people?
And she kept all those people, right? So, I mean, I get it that she's a great orator. She's a silver tongue speaker. Right. She tells you what you want to hear.
So is the devil.
But you know what? I'm sick and tired of hearing what people are saying. I want to now see what they do.
Yeah. Actions.
By the actions you shall know them. The Bible says by the fruits you shall know them, and the fruits are rotten and bad. Also, she's the one that said, I'm going to implement the 2030 agenda, the green garbage agenda. Yeah. You got to remember, you're talking to Texas of Canada. Alberta is the, it's Texas. Yeah. We have more oil than Saudi Arabia. Wow. Believe it or not. If I was the premier, I would turn Alberta into a Saudi Arabia. We would be the richest part of North America,
for sure.
In our country at least. What is happening? She loves the idea of the green energy, and she said it many times during different interviews. She is just saying it. I'm not going to implement as fast as the federal government wants it. Also,
that's a bummer, man.
Also, she said no digital ID. I'm not going to allow digital ID. She had a meeting with the minister in Ottawa. She came back with a $2 billion, and guess what? And a medical digital ID. So you got to pay attention what they do, not what they say. They are great talkers.
Across the board, every politician that rule.
Yeah, a lot of charlatan, silver-tongued, deceivious people.
And the last thing, because I know that there will be Canadians watching this, lots of them. Just a few weeks ago, we started Convoy 2.0, if you will. And there was lots of people that showed up, truckers and farmers, and people took part of the street, only one lane. So the other lane was open, traffic could go, but it was a little bit slowed down. And I think that's a very effective way of getting your message out. So the people still could go from point A to point B, but they could hear and see what people were saying. And Daniel Smith, believe it or not, sent about 200 officers armed with machine guns against the protesters. And she said that if they will do this again, all of the people will be arrested.
Wow.
We have a couple other rants and super chats. Can you read this one here, Steph?
We have Laneboy6 saying, America first is inevitable. Clinton knows what's up.
That's right.
End all foreign aid.
And we got another one here by Big Mike. Can you read this one?
Big Mike
read his
says,
name.
well, I'm not your guy, pal.
All right. We also have the redheaded libertarian saying, states permit marching, no permit equals blocked movement. Another super chat here says, Dogboy saying, quote, I noticed your guest doesn't mention the Balfour Act again. We'll talk about that, plus a lot more, all probably on another platform that we're going to go to in just a few minutes from now. As, of course, author, you've been through the ringer, the stories that you've been telling us, especially with the kind of police repression, the amount of prisons you've been in, the amount of crazy things that they did to you is absolutely insane. You're fighting back. You're launching a lawsuit. Tell us about this lawsuit while we are still on all the platforms.
Yeah, so what is happening to me, I mean, I have become the first Canadian to get the ticket when this whole big lie started. And 12 officers showed up. I was told at the very beginning that I am not allowed to feed the poor because we are in the middle of this great crisis. And of course, it didn't make any sense. So I replied to the mayor, I appealed it to the premier, I appealed it to the ministers, and I did not receive even one reply. Here's what I said. If we're truly in the middle of this great crisis, then my services of taking care of the poor, feeding them, are needed more than ever.
Exactly.
Right?
It's totally logical.
And they did not reply. And I said to them, what is going to happen to 15 to 20,000 different individuals if you're going to shut down shelters and soup kitchens? What do you think those people are going to do?
Exactly.
Because I know, I work with them for the past 25 years. They're going to turn into crime. They're going to whack your grandma's head. They're going to break into a car, into a garage, into your home, into a grocery store, because people need to eat. If you don't feed them, they will get their necessities of life this way or that way. Not one replied to me. At that moment, my friends, I knew right away, this is a big, fat lie. It has nothing to do with keeping us healthy or saving lives. Quite opposite. This is to hurt us, to destroy our economy, to subdue us. My friends, this is the biggest elimination of the middle class ever attempted in the history of mankind. They're wiping out the middle class. Why? Because the middle class is the opposition. If you have means, you can hire lawyers, you got friends, you can remortgage your house and you can keep fighting. And what they're creating right now, they're not even hiding. You will own nothing and you will be happy. Why? Because they will own everything. They fly the private jets. They drive the SUVs. They eat the most expensive Japanese steaks. So you got to understand what we are witnessing. This is a clear repetition of history of pharaohs, the wannabe pharaohs, and the rest of us slaves. So I saw that right away. And of course, growing up in Poland, I could smell it, I could see it, and I said to my friends, this is an attempt of the government to steal our rights away. They couldn't do it before, now they are using this as an opportunity. So I decided to fight. I ended up with over 40 citations. My record during our church service is over 120 police officers, 52 police cars, anti-terrorists, SWAT team, and the chief of police. I was told that now in Canada, you're not allowed to sing. Can you believe it? A government comes and says, you are prohibited by law. You are prohibited of singing. You cannot do Lord's Supper, Holy Communion. You cannot congregate.
They're doing that in the UK, and they're arresting people for singing church sermons outside of church. and people are literally going to jail. Sorry, hurry up. Finish up on your.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
It's craziness. So I end up with 15 tickets for that one church service because I was told that I did the unthinkable. I hired carolers. It was Christmas, and we were singing songs, and I gave hundreds of gifts away to the homeless people, and we fed them, and it was a great time. And of course, no one dropped dead, and we're still alive. And I was hugged by tens of thousands of people, and it's a total insanity. But
George Orwell didn't dream big enough to ban singing.
Yeah, I know. It's insane. So I decided to fight. I decided to resist this tyranny. And the only way I know how is through protest.
Right.
We're going back full circle to the idea that if a society cannot protest, you're done. You're finished. It's over. You are truly living in a totalitarian regime and you have no rights whatsoever. So protest is very important, but it has to be done peacefully. And I decided to do that. They kept coming, ticketing me. I kept fighting in the only way I could by doing the very thing I was told I'm not allowed to do. So I baptized people. I was criminally charged. I kept the church's door open. I was charged with inciting people to come. I was charged with criminal offense of inciting people to come to church. Well, I'm a pastor. That's what I do for a living. I incite people to come to the church.
So they criminalized your profession.
Yes. I was charged with officiating in illegal gathering, participating in illegal gathering. I was charged criminally for baptizing my daughter in a public river, in a public park. Man. I was charged criminally for not wearing a muzzle. All kinds of different things happened to me. But I stood tall. I kept fighting. I kept exposing them. And eventually, for my participation with the truck convoy, the Freedom Convoy, at that time I was called Canada's pastor. I was called the Freedom Pastor. And when he invited me to be part of the truck convoy movement, I'm telling you, this was the most beautiful thing I have ever seen on Canadian soil.
Agreed.
The love, people were feeding each other, loving, hugging, singing, crying. Children, dogs, cats, they were even bringing their horses. It was the most incredible thing I've ever seen.
I agree.
On a Canadian soil. So I was super proud, and I am to this day, that I was privileged. And listen to me, I was privileged to be part of this movement.
I love it.
The civil rights movement, the biggest in the history of Canada. Well, it landed me in prison. In prison, I was, of course, arrested by every force there is. There was this great takedown of El Chapo of Calgary, Al Capone of Alberta. I was arrested by RCMP, detectives, undercover police, SWAT team, special anti-terrorism
Weren't you
unit.
torn off a plane?
I was arrested at the tarmac. When was the last time you have seen anyone ever being arrested stepping out of the plane?
Yeah, unless they're like a
drug
dealer.
traffickers,
But have
cartel
you ever
members.
seen it?
Yep.
I've
No.
never seen it.
Maybe in the movies.
In the
but-
movies,
yeah.
right? Well, it happened to me. I stepped out of the plane. They were already waiting for me, and I was arrested and charged criminally
Yeah.
on a tarmac.
It was incredible.
It's crazy. So this story was going on, many arrests, and me, my brother David, my son, they tried to burn our house in the middle of the night, and they unscrewed tires of our pickup truck. The tire just took off. I was physically attacked. Our church was vandalized for 3 months. They tried to burn our church down. They managed to damage it, and they burned down our children's bus completely to the ground. So we went through hell back and forth, but we stood tall. We kept resisting them. We kept the church's doors open. I was attending rallies and protests and tried my best to be hope in the middle of this hopelessness, this tyranny. And eventually I end up in prison, solitary confinement, metal cages. I mean, what was the last time you talked to a criminal that was actually placed in a small metal cage, no bigger than a man sitting? It's insanity. And to this day, we have no answer why they locked a pastor in a metal cages, number of them. I was in solitary confinement. I was dragged from my cell to a concrete cell, no water, no washroom. I spent 21 days in total isolation. I was kidnapped by sheriffs, taken to MaxPot. MaxPot is a place, a prison for the most dangerous terrorists. And they kept me there in freezing conditions, minus 28 outside. It was crazy. 30 minutes outside of cell, freezing cell. When I complained and I said I'm freezing to death, they laughed in my face and they said, well, at least you have fresh air. I was guarded by 3 guards. I was denied access to writing materials. Can you believe it? I was told I am super dangerous. I cannot have a pen. And I was in an entire unit in prison for hundreds of people by myself.
Well, the pen is mightier than the sword.
Because you see, I was writing a book. And they saw it. They saw I was writing, and my lawyer smuggled the book. The book is coming in 2 months. It's already done. It's with the publishers, American publishers, and it's coming out within 2 months. It will be in a printed version.
Well, do you have a title
I have so many questions that I want to ask, but we already kind of went over time here on our regular established platforms. Now we are going to the alternative platforms that this platform actually punishes us for even talking about. But we are on the front page of this alternative platform right now. This kind of transition always keeps us humble. So we don't fumble. What other words do we have here?
I met my wife on Bumble.
Yes, as of course, you know where we're kind of nudging and might be alluding for you to go right now, as we are on the front page of that website right now, as the conversation will continue over there very soon. Just really quick, we have another super chat from the redheaded libertarian saying America would invade Saudi Alberta so fast. LOL. I'm not your buddy guy responded to that by saying I would be okay with that. I would be too, kind of, actually. Steph, read this one from Clint Tofungus.
Come and liberate us, please.
Yes, that's been my major policy. I'm anti-intervention, except for Canada. Steph, read this one.
Luke, that affect...
No, this one right here.
Luke,
okay,
that
go ahead.
affects scared...
Say his name.
Clint's Tofungus says... Luke, that effect scared the ish out of me. Love this conversation.
All right, that conversation, of course, continues on this alternative platform. Before we leave this platform, just really quick, Arthur, where can people find your work? Where can they support you?
So right here, we have filed the biggest lawsuit in the history of Canada. We're going after Attorney General. We're going after the Chief of Police, Alberta Health Services. We're going after RCMP and all kinds of other prison. Of course, the director was served with this document and a few days later resigned. So that tells you how powerful this document is. And if you are interested to read the whole thing, and we're going to talk about this on that other platform, go to streetchurch.ca, streetchurch.ca. On the top, you will have legal fight. There is a press conference that we did with the lawyers explaining what the whole thing is all about, and you will be able to read the whole thing. It's a fascinating document. Even when I read it, I said, oh my God, what they did to this guy. And then I kind of remembered, oh, it's me. I am actually reading about what they did to me. So sometimes when I share my story, it's so surreal. Right. It's like a Hollywood movie production that I have to go back and say, like, my God, this actually happened to me. I suppressed a lot of the feelings of what they did, stripped naked in front of men and women, threatened. 5 different inmates testified already that the guards were giving them incentives to murder me in prison. I was attacked, assaulted, you name it, happened to me. And I'm super, super happy, maybe for the first time in my life, when I can actually go after the villains. It's time to go on the offense. It's time to go after the bad guys. We have been defending ourselves for way too long. It's time to start swinging.
Preach. I love this guy. All right, you're going to want to tune in to Humble Bumble, Don't Fumble over on the other platform, because I have so many questions about what he just said, and that was really wild. Like, those are major allegations, so I'm very, very curious to dive in. At Liberty Lock Pod on X, if you want to support my work, you can subscribe there. Liberty Lockdown's the show on YouTube and the other platform. Make sure you subscribe, because I got a new episode dropping tonight at 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern. That's about it. Steph, where can people follow you?
People can follow me on Instagram at StephWeAreChange or on X at StephWRC.
All right, just another reminder, if you're a member of Luke Unfiltered,